Beetles are insects that form the order Coleoptera, Calyptric, in the superorder Holometabola. Their front pair of wings are hardened into wing cases, elytra, distinguishing them from most other insects. The Coleoptera, with about 400,000 described species, is the largest of all orders, constituting almost 40% of described insects and 25% of all known animal species. New species are discovered frequently, with estimates suggesting that there are between 0.9 and 0.1 million total species. However, the number of beetle species is challenged by the number of species in dipterans flies and hymenopterans wasps. Found in almost every habitat except the sea and the polar regions, they interact with their ecosystems in several ways. Beetles often feed on plants and fungi, break down animal and plant debris, and eat other invertebrates. Some species are serious agricultural pests, such as the Colorado potato beetle, while others, such as Coccinellidae ladybirds or ladybugs, eat aphids, scale insects, thrips, and other plant-sucking insects that damage crops. Some others also have unusual characteristics, such as fireflies, which use a light-emitting organ for mating and communication purposes. Beetles typically have a particularly hard exoskeleton, including the elytra, though some, such as the rove beetles, have very short elytra, while blister beetles have softer elytra. The general anatomy of a beetle is quite uniform and typical of insects, although there are several examples of novelty, such as adaptations in water beetles, which trap air bubbles under the elytra for use while diving. Beetles are holometabolans, which means that they undergo complete metamorphosis, with a series of conspicuous and relatively abrupt changes in body structure between hatching and becoming adult after a relatively immobile pupal stage. Some, such as stag beetles, have a marked sexual dimorphism, the males possessing enormously enlarged mandibles, which they use to fight other males. Many beetles are aposematic, with bright colors and patterns warning of their toxicity, while others are harmless Batesian mimics of such insects. Many beetles, including those that live in sandy places, have effective camouflage. Beetles are prominent in human culture, from the sacred scarabs of ancient Egypt to beetlewing art, and use as pets or fighting insects for entertainment and gambling. Many beetle groups are brightly and attractively colored, making them objects of collection and decorative displays. Over 300 species are used as food, mostly as larvae. Species widely consumed include mealworms and rhinoceros beetle larvae. However, the major impact of beetles on human life is as agricultural, forestry, and horticultural pests. Serious pest species include the boll weevil of cotton, the Colorado potato beetle, the coconut hispine beetle, the mountain pine beetle, and many others. Most beetles, however, do not cause economic damage, and some, such as numerous species of lady beetles, are beneficial by helping to control insect pests. The scientific study of beetles is known as coleopterology. Coleoptera at the State Museum of Natural History, Karlsruhe, Germanic name of the taxonomic order, Coleoptera, comes from the Greek coleopteros, given to the group by Aristotle for their elytra, hardened shield-like forewings, from coleos, sheath, and pteron, wing. The English name beetle comes from the Old English word batella, little biter, related to BC tan, to bite, leading to Middle English batile. Another Old English name for beetle is ephor, chafer, used in names such as cockchafer, from the Proto-Germanic asterisk kebra beetle, compare German kiefer, Dutch kever, Afrikaans cure. Distribution and diversity. Beetles are by far the largest order of insects. The roughly 400,000 species make up about 40% of all insect species so far described, and about 25% of all animal species. A 2015 study provided for independent estimates of the total number of beetle species, giving a mean estimate of some 1.5 million, with a surprisingly narrow range spanning all for estimates from a -1 of 0.9 to a maximum of 2.1 million beetle species. The four estimates made use of host specificity relationships 1.5 to 1.9 million, ratios with other taxas 0.9 to 1.2 million, plant beetle ratios 1.2 to 1.3, and extrapolations based on body size by year of description 1.7 to 2.1 million. This immense diversity led the evolutionary biologist J.B. Esholdan to quip when some theologians asked him what could be inferred about the mind of the Christian God from the works of his creation, an inordinate fondness for beetles. However, the ranking of beetles as most diverse has been challenged. Multiple studies posit that diptera flies or Hymenoptera sawflies, wasps, ants, and bees may have more species. Beetles are found in nearly all habitats, including freshwater and coastal habitats, wherever vegetative foliage is found, from trees and their bark to flowers, leaves, and underground near roots, even inside plants and galls, in every plant tissue, including dead or decaying ones. Tropical forest canopies have a large and diverse fauna of beetles, including Carabidae, 20 Chrysomelidae, and Scarabaeidae. The heaviest beetle, indeed the heaviest insect stage, is the larva of the Goliath beetle, Goliathus goliatus, which can attain a mass of at least 115 grams for 0.1 ounces and a length of 11.5 centimeters. Adult male Goliath beetles are the heaviest beetle in its adult stage, weighing 70 to 100 g to 0.5 to 3.5 ounces and measuring up to 11 centimeters. Adult elephant beetles, Megasoma elephas, and Megasoma actaeon often reach 50 grams 1.8 ounces and 10 centimeters 3.9 in. The longest beetle is the Hercules beetle dynast's Hercules, with a maximum overall length of at least 16.7 centimeters 6.6 in, including the very long pronotal horn. The smallest recorded beetle, and the smallest free-living insect as of 2015, is the featherwing beetle Pseudocellum usawacensis, which may measure as little as 325 micrometers in length. The oldest known beetle is Coleopsis, from the earliest Permian, a coelian of Germany, around 295 million years ago. Early beetles from the Permian, which are collectively grouped into the Protocoleoptera, are thought to have been xylophagous, wood-eating, and wood-boring. Fossils from this time have been found in Siberia and Europe, for instance in the red slate fossil beds of Niedermarschall near Mainz, Germany. Further fossils have been found in Abora, Czech Republic, and Shekarda in the Ural Mountains, Russia. However, there are only a few fossils from North America before the Middle Permian, although both Asia and North America had been united to Euramerica. The first discoveries from North America, made in the Wellington Formation of Oklahoma, were published in 2005 and 2008, 2930. The earliest members of modern beetle lineages appeared during the late Permian. In the Permian-Triassic extinction event at the end of the Permian, most Protocoleopteran lineages became extinct. Beetle diversity did not recover to pre-extinction levels until the Middle Triassic. Jurassic beetle genera were mainly saprophages detridivores in the Permian and Triassic. During the Jurassic, herbivorous and then carnivorous genera became more common. In the Cenozoic, genera at all three trophic levels became far more numerous. During the Jurassic, 210 to 145 Mia, there was a dramatic increase in the diversity of beetle families, 29 including the development and growth of carnivorous and herbivorous species. The Chrysomelidae diversified around the same time, feeding on a wide array of plant hosts from cycads and conifers to angiosperms. Close to the Upper Jurassic, the Cupididae decreased, but the diversity of the early plant-eating species increased. Most recent plant-eating beetles feed on flowering plants or angiosperms, whose success contributed to a doubling of plant-eating species during the Middle Jurassic. However, the increase of the number of beetle families during the Cretaceous does not correlate with the increase of the number of angiosperm species. Around the same time, numerous primitive weevils, e.g. Curculionoidea, and click beetles, e.g. Elateroidea, appeared. The first jewel beetles, e.g. Buprestidae, are present, but they remained rare until the Cretaceous. The first scarab beetles were not coprophagous, but presumably fed on rotting wood with the help of fungus. They are an early example of a mutualistic relationship. There are more than 150 important fossil sites from the Jurassic, the majority in Eastern Europe and North Asia. Outstanding sites include Solnhofen in Upper Bavaria, Germany, 37, Karatau in South Kazakhstan, 38, the Yixian Formation in Liaoning, North China, 39, as well as the Zhulongshan Formation and further fossil sites in Mongolia. In North America, there are only a few sites with fossil records of insects from the Jurassic, namely the shell limestone deposits in the Hartford Basin, the Deerfield Basin, and the Newark Basin. Cretaceous saw the fragmenting of the southern landmass, with the opening of the southern Atlantic Ocean and the isolation of New Zealand, while South America, Antarctica, and Australia grew more distant. The diversity of Cupididae and Archostemmata decreased considerably. Predatory ground beetles Carabidae and rove beetles Staphylinidae began to distribute into different patterns. The Carabidae predominantly occurred in the warm regions, while the Staphylinidae and click beetles Elateridae preferred temperate climates. Likewise, predatory species of Claroidea and Cucajoidea hunted their prey under the bark of trees together with the jewel beetles Buprestidae. The diversity of jewel beetles increased rapidly as they were the primary consumers of wood. While longhorn beetles Cerambycidae were rather rare, their diversity increased only towards the end of T. Upper Cretaceous. The first coprophagous beetles are from the Upper Cretaceous and may have lived on the excrement of herbivorous dinosaurs. The first species where both larvae and adults are adapted to an aquatic lifestyle are found. Whirligig beetles Gyrinnidae were moderately diverse, although other early beetles, e.g. Diticidae, were less, with the most widespread being the species of Coptoclavidae, which preyed on aquatic fly larvae. A 2020 review of the paleoecological interpretations of fossil beetles from Cretaceous ambers has suggested that saproxylicity was the most common feeding strategy, with fungivorous species in particular appearing to dominate. Many fossil sites worldwide contain beetles from the Cretaceous. Most are in Europe and Asia and belong to the temperate climate zone during the Cretaceous. Lower Cretaceous sites include the cratofossil beds in the Araripe Basin in the Ceará, North Brazil, as well as overlying Santana Formation. The latter was near the equator at that time. In Spain, important sites are near Montsec and Las Hoyas. In Australia, the Coonawarra fossil beds of the Corumbra group, South Gippsland, Victoria, are noteworthy. Major sites from the Upper Cretaceous include Ksiljar in South Kazakhstan and Arkhangala in Russia. Cenozoic fossil Buprestid beetle from the Eocene 50 Mia Mesolpit, which retains its structural cult-orbital fossils, are abundant in the Cenozoic. By the Quaternary up to 1.6 Mia, fossil species are identical to living ones, while from the late Miocene 5.7 Mia, the fossils are still so close to modern forms that they are most likely the ancestors of living species. The large oscillations in climate during the Quaternary caused beetles to change their geographic distributions so much that current location gives little clue to the biogeographical history of a species. It is evident that geographic isolation of populations must often have been broken as insects moved under the influence of changing climate, causing mixing of gene pools, rapid evolution, and extinctions, especially in middle latitudes. Phylogenetic very large number of beetle species poses special problems for classification. Some families contain tens of thousands of species and need to be divided into subfamilies and tribes. Polyphaga is the largest suborder, containing more than 300,000 described species in more than 170 families, including rove beetles Staphylinidae, scarab beetles Scarabidae, blister beetles Meloidae, stag beetles Lucanidae, and true weevils Curculionidae. These polyphagan beetle groups can be identified by the presence of cervical sclerates, hardened parts of the head, used as points of attachment for muscles, absent in the other suborders. Adefiga contains about 10 families of largely predatory beetles, includes ground beetles, Carabidae, water beetles, Diticidae, and whirligig beetles, Gyraenidae. In these insects, the testes are tubular and the first abdominal sternum plate of the exoskeleton is divided by the hind coxae, the basal joints of the beetle's legs. Archostemmata contains for families of mainly wood-eating beetles, including reticulated beetles, Cupadidae, and the telephone pole beetle. The archostemmata have an exposed plate called the metatrochanton in front of the basal segment or coxa of the hind leg. Myxophaga contains about 65 described species in four families, mostly very small, including Hydroscaphidae and the genus Pherias. The myxophagan beetles are small and mostly alga feeders. Their mouth parts are characteristic in lacking galea and having a mobile tooth on their left mandible. The consistency of beetle morphology, in particular their possession of elytra, has long suggested that Coleoptera is monophyletic, though there have been doubts about the arrangement of the suborders, namely the Adefiga, Archostemmata, Myxophaga, and Polyphaga within that clade. The twisted wing parasites, Strepsiptera, are thought to be a sister group to the beetles, having split from them in the early Permian. Molecular phylogenetic analysis confirms that the Coleoptera are monophyletic. Duane McKenna et al. 2015 used 8 nuclear genes for 367 species from 172 of 183 Coleopteran families. They split the Adefiga into 2 clades, Hydrodefiga and Gedophaga, broke up the Cucajoidea into 3 clades, and placed the Lyme Exoloidea within the Tenebrionoidea. The Polyphaga appear to date from the Triassic. Most extant beetle families appear to have arisen in the Cretaceous. 60. The cladogram is based on McKenna 2015. The number of species in each group, mainly superfamilies, is shown in parentheses, and boldface if over 10,000. 61 English common names are given where possible. Dates of origin of major groups are shown in italics in millions of years ago. Phytophaga Chrysomaloidea Chrysomelidae 35,000, leaf beetles. External morphology beetle body structure using cocafer. A. Head. B. Thorax. C. Abdomen. 1. Antenna. 2. Compound eye. 3. Femur. 4. Elytron wing cover. 5. Tibia. 6. Tarsus. 7. Claws. 8. Mouth parts. 9. Prothorax. 10. Mesothorax. 11. Metathorax. 12. Abdominal sternites. 13. Pygidium. Beetles are generally characterized by a particular and hard forewings elytra, not usable for flying. Almost all beetles have mandibles that move in a horizontal plane. The mouth parts are rarely suctorial, though they are sometimes reduced. The maxillae always bear palps. The antennae usually have 11 or fewer segments, except in some groups, like the Cerambycidae longhorn beetles and the Rhipoceridae cicada parasite beetles. The coxae of the legs are usually located recessed within a coxal cavity. The genitalic structures are telescoped into the last abdominal segment in all extant beetles. Beetle larvae can often be confused with those of other holometable groups. The beetle's exoskeleton is made up of numerous plates, called sclerates, separated by thin sutures. This design provides armored defenses while maintaining flexibility. The general anatomy of a beetle is quite uniform, although specific organs and appendages vary greatly in appearance and function between the many families in the order. Like all insects, beetles' bodies are divided into 3 sections: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. 8. Because there are so many species, identification is quite difficult and relies on attributes including the shape of the antennae, the tarsal formulae and shapes of these small segments on the legs, the mouth parts, and the ventral plate sterna, pleura, coxae. In many species, accurate identification can only be made by examination of the unique male genitalic structures. Head front view of the head of Lamia textor head. having mouth parts projecting forward or sometimes downturned, is usually heavily sclerotized and is sometimes very large. The eyes are compound and may display remarkable adaptability, as in the case of the aquatic whirligig beetles Gyrinidae, where they are split to allow a view both above and below the waterline. A few longhorn beetles Cerambycidae and weevils, as well as some fireflies Regophthalmidae, have divided eyes, while many have eyes that are notched, and a few have ocelli, small, simple eyes usually farther back on the head on the vertex. These are more common in larvae than in adults. The anatomical organization of the compound eyes may be modified and depends on whether a species is primarily crepuscular, or diurnally or nocturnally active. Ocelli are found in the adult carpet beetle as a single central ocellus in Dermestidae, some rove beetles, Omalinae, and the Derodontidae. Polyphylla fullo has distinctive fan-like antennae, one of several distinct forms for the appendages among beetles. Beetle antennae are primarily organs of sensory perception and can detect motion, odor, and chemical substances, 66, but may also be used to physically feel a beetle's environment. Beetle families may use antennae in different ways. For example, when moving quickly, tiger beetles may not be able to see very well and instead hold their antennae rigidly in front of them in order to avoid obstacles. Certain Cerambycidae use antennae to balance, and blister beetles may use them for grasping. Some aquatic beetle species may use antennae for gathering air and passing it under the body whilst submerged. Equally, some families use antennae during mating, and a few species use them for defense. In the Cerambycid Onychoceras albatarsus, the antennae have venom-injecting structures used in defense, which is unique among arthropods. 68 antennae vary greatly in form, sometimes between the sexes, but are often similar within any given family. Antennae may be clubbed, thread-like, angled, shaped like a string of beads, comb-like either on one side or both, bipectinate, or toothed. The physical variation of antennae is important for the identification of many beetle groups. The Curculionidae have elbowed or geniculate antennae. Feather-like flabellate antennae are a restricted form found in the Rhipoceridae and a few other families. The Sylphidae have a capitate antennae with a spherical head at the tip. The Scarabaeidae typically have lamellate antennae with the terminal segments extended into long flat structures stacked together. The Carabidae typically have thread-like antennae. The antennae arises between the eye and the mandibles, and in the Tenebrionidae, the antennae rise in front of a notch that breaks the usually circular outline of the compound eye. They are segmented and usually consist of 11 parts. The first part is called the scape, and the second part is the pedicel. The other segments are jointly called the flagellum. Beetles have mouth parts like those of grasshoppers. The mandibles appear as large pincers on the front of some beetles. The mandibles are a pair of hard, often tooth-like structures that move horizontally to grasp, crush, or cut food or enemies, see defense, below. To pairs of finger-like appendages, the maxillary and labial palpi are found around the mouth in most beetles, serving to move food into the mouth. In many species, the mandibles are sexually dimorphic, with those of the males enlarged enormously compared with those of females of the same species. Thorax is segmented into the two discernible parts, the pro and pterothorax. The pterothorax is the fused meso and metathorax, which are commonly separated in other insect species, although flexibly articulate from the prothorax. When viewed from below, the thorax is that part from which all three pairs of legs and both pairs of wings or eyes. The abdomen is everything posterior to the thorax. When viewed from above, most beetles appear to have three clear sections, but this is deceptive. On the beetle's upper surface, the middle section is a hard plate called the pronotum, which is only the front part of the thorax. The back part of the thorax is concealed by the beetle's wings. This further segmentation is usually best seen on the abdomen. Citation needed: Acelia sulcatus, a diving beetle with hind legs adapted as swimming lynx legs. The multi-segmented legs end in 2 to 5 small segments called tarsi. Like many other insect orders, beetles have claws, usually one pair, on the end of the last tarsal segment of each leg. While most beetles use their legs for walking, legs have been variously adapted for other uses. Aquatic beetles, including the Diticidae diving beetles, Haloplidae, and many species of Hydrophilidae, the legs, often the last pair, are modified for swimming, typically with rows of long hairs. Male diving beetles have suctorial cups on their forelegs that they use to grasp females. Other beetles have fossile legs widened and often spined for digging. Species with such adaptations are found among the scarabs, ground beetles, and clown beetles Histiridae. The hind legs of some beetles, such as flea beetles within Chrysomelidae and flea weevils within Curculionidae, have enlarged femurs that help them leap. Wing-checkered beetle trichids alvarius taking off, showing the hard elytra forewings adapted as wing cases held stiffly away from the flight wings. The forewings of beetles are not used for flight, but form elytra which cover the hind part of the body and protect the hindwings. The elytra are usually hard shell-like structures which must be raised to allow the hindwings to move for flight. However, in the soldier beetles Cantharidae, the elytra are soft, earning this family the name of leatherwings. Other soft-winged beetles include the net-winged beetle Calopteron discrepans, which has brittle wings that rupture easily in order to release chemicals for defense. Beetles' flight wings are crossed with veins and are folded after landing, often along these veins and stored below the elytra. A fold jugum of the membrane at the base of each wing is characteristic. Some beetles have lost the ability to fly. These include some ground beetles, Carabidae, and some true weevils Curculionidae, as well as desert and cave-dwelling species of other families. Many have the two elytra fused together, forming a solid shield over the abdomen. In a few families, both the ability to fly and the elytra have been lost, as in the glowworms Phangatidae, where the females resemble larvae throughout their lives. 76. The presence of elytra and wings does not always indicate that the beetle will fly. For example, the tansy beetle walks between habitats despite being physically capable of flight. The abdomen is the section behind the metathorax, made up of a series of rings, each with a hole for breathing and respiration, called a spiracle, composing 3 different segmented sclerets, the tergum, pleura, and the sternum. The tergum in almost all species is membranous, or usually soft and concealed by the wings and elytra when not in flight. The pleura are usually small or hidden in some species, with each pleuron having a single spiracle. The sternum is the most widely visible part of the abdomen, being a more or less sclerotized segment. The abdomen itself does not have any appendages, but some, for example, Mordelidae, have articulating sternal lobes. Anatomy and physiology of beetles' body systems. Digestive system of beetles is primarily adapted for a herbivorous diet. Digestion takes place mostly in the anterior midgut, although in predatory groups like the Carabidae, most digestion occurs in the crop by means of midgut enzymes. In the Elateridae, the larvae are liquid feeders that extraorally digest their food by secreting enzymes. The alimentary canal basically consists of a short, narrow pharynx, a widened expansion, the crop, and a poorly developed gizzard. This is followed by the midgut that varies in dimensions between species, with a large amount of cecum, and the hindgut with varying lengths. There are typically 4 to 6 malpighian tubules. Nervous system in beetles contains all the types found in insects, varying between different species, from 3 thoracic and 7 or 8 abdominal ganglia, which can be distinguished to that in which all the thoracic and abdominal ganglia are fused to form a respiratory system. Didiscus spiracles right on upper side of abdomen, normally covered by the elytra, are in contact with an air bubble when the beetle dives. Like most insects, beetles inhale air for the oxygen it contains and exhale carbon dioxide via a tracheal system. Air enters the body through spiracles and circulates within the hemicoel in a system of trachea and tracheoles, through whose walls the gases can diffuse. Diving beetles, such as the Diticidae, carry a bubble of air with them when they dive. Such a bubble may be contained under the elytra or against the body by specialized hydrophobic hairs. The bubble covers at least some of the spiracles, permitting air to enter the trachea. The function of the bubble is not only to contain a store of air, but to act as a physical gill. The air that it traps is in contact with oxygenated water, so as the animal's consumption depletes the oxygen in the bubble, more oxygen can diffuse in to replenish it. Carbon dioxide is more soluble in water than either oxygen or nitrogen, so it readily diffuses out faster than in. Nitrogen is the most plentiful gas in the bubble, and the least soluble, so it constitutes a relatively static component of the bubble and acts as a stable medium for respiratory gases to accumulate in and pass through. Occasional visits to the surface are sufficient for the beetle to re-establish the constitution of the bubble. Circulatory system. Like other insects, beetles have open circulatory systems based on hemolymph rather than blood. As in other insects, a segmented tube-like heart is attached to the dorsal wall of the hemicoel. It has paired inlets or ostia at intervals down its length and circulates the hemolymph from the main cavity of the hemicoel and out through the anterior cavity in the head. Specialized organs. Different glands are specialized for different pheromones to attract mates. Pheromones from species of Rudolinae are produced from epithelial cells lining the inner surface of the apical abdominal segments. Amino acid-based pheromones of Melileuthinae are produced from aversible glands on the abdominal apex. Other species produce different types of pheromones. Dermestids produce esters, and species of Elateridae produce fatty acid-derived aldehydes and acetates. To attract a mate, fireflies Lampyridae use modified fat body cells with transparent surfaces backed with reflective uric acid crystals to produce light by bioluminescence. Light production is highly efficient. By oxidation of luciferin catalyzed by enzymes, luciferases, in the presence of adenosine triphosphate ATP and oxygen, producing oxyluciferin, carbon dioxide, and light. Both families are sensitive to ultrasonic frequencies, with strong evidence indicating they function to detect the presence of bats by their ultrasonic echolocation. Reproduction and development. Beetles are members of the superorder Holaminobola, and accordingly most of them undergo complete metamorphosis. The typical form of metamorphosis in beetles passes through four main stages: the egg, the larva, the pupa, and the imago or adult. The larvae are commonly called grubs, and the pupa sometimes is called the chrysalis. In some species, the pupa may be enclosed in a cocoon constructed by the larva towards the end of its final instar. Some beetles, such as typical members of the families Meloidae and Rhipiferidae, go further, undergoing hypermetamorphosis, in which the first instar takes the form of a triungulin. Manning-punctate flower chafers Neorina punctata, Scarabaeidae, meaning some beetles have intricate mating behavior. Pheromone communication is often important in locating a mate. Different species use different pheromones. Scarab beetles, such as the Rudolinae, use pheromones derived from fatty acid synthesis, and others use pheromones from organic compounds, while other scarabs, such as the Melileuthinae, use amino acids and terpenoids. The males and females engage in a complex dialogue before mating. Each species has a unique combination of flight patterns, duration, composition, and intensity of the light produced. Before mating, males and females may stridulate, or vibrate the objects they are on. In the Meloidae, the male climbs onto the dorsum of the female and strokes his antennae on her head, palps, and antennae. In Eupompha, the male draws his antennae along his longitudinal vertex. They may not mate at all if they do not perform the precopulatory ritual. 8. This mating behavior may be different amongst dispersed populations of the same species. For example, the mating of a Russian population of tansy beetle, Chrysalina graminis, is preceded by an elaborate ritual involving the male tapping the female's eyes. pronotum and antennae with its antennae, which is not evident in the population of this species in the United Kingdom. In another example, the intromittent organ of male thistle tortoise beetles is a long, tube-like structure called the flagellum, which is thin and curved. When not in use, the flagellum is stored inside the abdomen of the male and can extend out to be longer than the male when needed. During mating, this organ bends to the complex shape of the female reproductive organ, which includes a coil duct that the male must penetrate with the organ. Furthermore, these physical properties of the thistle tortoise beetle have been studied because the ability of a thin, flexible structure to harden without buckling or rupturing is mechanically challenging and may have important implications for the development of microscopic catheters in modern medicine. Competition can play a part in the mating rituals of species, such as burying beetles Nichrophorus, the insects fighting to determine which can mate. Many male beetles are territorial and fiercely defend their territories from intruding males. In such species, the male often has horns on the head or thorax, making its body length greater than that of a female. Copulation is generally quick, but in some cases lasts for several hours. During copulation, sperm cells are transferred to the female to fertilize the egg. Life cycle of the stag beetle includes 3 instars. Essentially, all beetles lay eggs, though some Myrmecophilus aleacarinae and some Chrysomelinae, which live in mountains or the subarctic, are ovoviviparous, laying eggs which hatch almost immediately. 83 beetle eggs generally have smooth surfaces and are soft, though the Cupididae have hard eggs. Eggs vary widely between species. The eggs tend to be small in species with many instars larval stages, and in those that lay large numbers of eggs. A female may lay from several dozen to several thousand eggs during her lifetime, depending on the extent of parental care. This ranges from the simple laying of eggs under a leaf to the parental care provided by scarab beetles, which house, feed, and protect their young. The Atelobidae roll leaves and lay their eggs inside the roll for protection. Larva. The larva is usually the principal feeding stage of the beetle life cycle. Larvae tend to feed voraciously once they emerge from their eggs. Some feed externally on plants, such as those of certain leaf beetles, while others feed within their food sources. Examples of internal feeders are most Buprestidae and longhorn beetles. The larvae of many beetle families are predatory like the adults, ground beetles, ladybirds, rove beetles. The larval period varies between species, but can be as long as several years. The larvae of skin beetles undergo a degree of reverse development when starved, and later grow back to the previously attained level of maturity. The cycle can be repeated many times. See biological immortality. 88 larval morphology is highly varied amongst species, with well-developed and sclerotized heads, distinguishable thoracic and abdominal segments, usually the 10th, though sometimes the 8th or 9th. Scarabaeiform larvae of Hercules beetle larvae can be differentiated from other insect larvae by their hardened, often darkened heads, the presence of chewing mouthparts, and spiracles along the sides of their bodies. Like adult beetles, the larvae are varied in appearance, particularly between beetle families. Beetles with somewhat flattened, highly mobile larvae include the ground beetles and rove beetles. Their larvae are described as campodiform. Some beetle larvae resemble hardened worms with dark head capsules and minute legs. These are elatriform larvae and are found in the click beetle, Elateridae, and darkling beetle, Tenebrionidae families. Some elatriform larvae of click beetles are known as wireworms. Beetles in the Scarabeodea have short, thick larvae described as scarabaeiform, more commonly known as grubs. All beetle larvae go through several instars, which are the developmental stages between each molt. In many species, the larvae simply increase in size with each successive instar as more food is consumed. In some cases, however, more dramatic changes occur. Among certain beetle families or genera, particularly those that exhibit parasitic lifestyles, the first instar, the planidium, is highly mobile to search out a host. while the following instars are more sedentary and remain on or within their host. This is known as hypermetamorphosis. It occurs in the Meloidae, Micromalthidae, and Rhipiferidae. The blister beetle Epicauda vittata meloidae, for example, has 3 distinct larval stages. Its first stage, the triungulin, has longer legs to go in search of the eggs of grasshoppers. After feeding for a week, it molts to the second stage, called the caraboid stage, which resembles the larva of a carabid beetle. In another week, it molts and assumes the appearance of a scarabade larva, the scarabadoid stage. Its penultimate larval stage is the pseudopupa or the corcate larva, which will overwinter and pupate until the next spring. The larval period can vary widely. A fungus-feeding staphyliniid Phaneroda fasciata undergoes 3 molts in 3.2 days at room temperature, while Anisotoma sp. Leodidae completes its larval stage in the fruiting body of slime mold in 2 days and possibly represents the fastest-growing beetles. Dermestid beetles, Trogoderma inclusum, can remain in an extended larval state under unfavorable conditions, even reducing their size between molts. A larva is reported to have survived for 3.5 years in an enclosed container. Behavior Phocianus pyrillus, firefly, in flight. The elytra allow beetles to both fly and move through confined spaces, doing so by folding the delicate wings under the elytra while not flying, and folding their wings out. The unfolding and folding of the wings is operated by muscles attached to the wing base. As long as the tension on the radial and cubital veins remains, the wings remain straight. 8. Some beetle species, many Cetoninae, some Scarabaeinae, Curculionidae, and Buprestidae, fly with the elytra closed, with the metathoracic wings extended under the lateral elytra margins. 93. The altitude reached by beetles in flight varies. One study investigating the flight altitude of the ladybird species Coccinella septempuncta and Harmonia axaridis using radar showed that, whilst the majority in flight over a single location were at 150 to 195 meters above ground level, some reached altitudes of over 1,100 meters. Many rove beetles have greatly reduced elytra, and while they are capable of flight, they most often move on the ground. They're soft bodies and strong abdominal muscles make them flexible, easily able to wriggle into small cracks. Aquatic beetles use several techniques for retaining air beneath the water's surface. Diving beetles, Dyticidae, hold air between the abdomen and the elytra when diving. Hydrophilidae have hairs on their undersurface that retain a layer of air against their bodies. Adult crawling water beetles use both their elytra and their hind coxae, the basal segment of the back legs, in air retention, while whirligig beetles simply carry an air bubble down with them whenever they dive. Communication bells have a variety of ways to communicate, including the use of pheromones. The mountain pine beetle emits a pheromone to attract other beetles to a tree. The mass of beetles are able to overcome the chemical defenses of the tree. After the tree's defenses have been exhausted, the beetles emit an anti-aggregation pheromone. This species can stridulate to communicate, 97, but others may use sound to defend themselves when attacked. Parental chorea dung beetle rolling dung parental care is found in a few families 99 of beetle, perhaps for protection against adverse conditions and predators. The rove beetle Bledia spectabilis lives in salt marshes, so the eggs and larvae are endangered by the rising tide. The maternal beetle patrols the eggs and larvae, burrowing to keep them from flooding and asphyxiating, and protects them from the predatory carabid beetle Descheritrichus gustavi and from the parasitoid Dal wasp Barachnemus bleediator, which kills some 15% of the larvae. Burying beetles are attentive parents and participate in cooperative care and feeding of their offspring. Both parents work to bury small animal carcass to serve as a food resource for their young and build a brood chamber around it. The parents prepare the carcass and protect it from competitors and from early decomposition. After their eggs hatch, the parents keep the larvae clean of fungus and bacteria and help the larvae feed by regurgitating food for them. Some dung beetles provide parental care, collecting herbivore dung and laying eggs within that food supply, an instance of mass provisioning. Some species do not leave after this stage, but remain to safeguard their offspring. Most species of beetles do not display parental care behaviors after the eggs have been laid. Subsociality, where females guard their offspring, is well documented into families of Chrysomelidae, Cassidinae, and Chrysomelinae. Eusocialitae social involves cooperative brood care, including brood care of offspring from other individuals, overlapping generations within a colony of adults, and a division of labor into reproductive and non-reproductive groups. 109. Few organisms outside Hymenoptera exhibit this behavior. The only beetle to do so is the weevil Austroplatypus incompertus. This Australian species lives in horizontal networks of tunnels in the heartwood of eucalyptus trees. It is one of more than 300 species of wood-boring ambrosia beetles which distribute the spores of ambrosia fungi. The fungi grow in the beetles' tunnels, providing food for the beetles and their larvae. Female offspring remain in the tunnels and maintain the fungal growth, probably never reproducing. Cooperative brood care is also found in the best beetles, Poecilidae, where the larvae feed on the semi-digested feces of the adults. Feeding Hycleus sp. Meloidae feeding on the petals of Ipomea carna beetles are able to exploit a wide diversity of food sources available in their many habitats. Some are omnivores, eating both plants and animals. Other beetles are highly specialized in their diet. Many species of leaf beetles, longhorn beetles, and weevils are very host-specific, feeding on only a single species of plant. Ground beetles and rove beetles Staphylinidae, among others, are primarily carnivorous and catch and consume many other arthropods and small prey, such as earthworms and snails. While most predatory beetles are generalists, a few species have more specific prey requirements or preferences. Decaying organic matter is a primary diet for many species. This can range from dung, which is consumed by coprophagous species, such as certain scarab beetles in the Scarabaeidae, to dead animals, which are eaten by necrophagous species, such as the carrion beetles, Sophidae. Some beetles found in dung and carrion are in fact predatory. These include members of the Hysteridae and Sophidae, preying on the larvae of coprophagous and necrophagous insects. Many beetles feed under bark. Some feed on wood while others feed on fungi growing on wood or leaf litter. Some beetles have special mycangia, structures for the transport of fungal spores. Thanks for watching.